Apparently, the original Apostles' Creed just didn't do justice to the life and ministry of Jesus. So Hebrew roots teacher Michael Rood made a new creed. Here's how he bills it. With more than 30 definite statements derived from Genesis to Revelation, the new Apostles' Creed declares what we believe as Torah-observant followers of Yeshua. Let's see what this is all about. In this new creed, which was published earlier this year, Michael Rood makes 55 we believe statements. I wasn't able to find a written version of the creed online, other than the beautiful $20 poster he has for sale on his website, but I'll link to his video of the creed below. Today I'm going to give you a brief overview of this new Apostles' Creed, and then we'll drill down on 5 of its many questionable statements. And as we dive in, we're going to hear from Mr. Rood in his own words. And you'll notice it's a bit of a dramatic presentation. He's standing in front of an ancient church background. There's reverb on his voice, sacred sounding music, and the sound effect of a crowd chanting in agreement after each statement. Now, I don't know Mr. Rood personally, and I've not watched very much of his material. I am envious of his impressive beard, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's genuine in his desire to honor and obey God. And he's got 150,000 subscribers, and his videos have been viewed over 25 million times, so his message is finding an audience. And that's a little concerning to me. Now you'll notice that the critiques I'm going to share aren't aimed at him personally. As you know, I don't attack people, but ideas are fair game. And as you're watching, if you think I misunderstood or mischaracterized his statements, let me know in the comments below. I'm always open to correction. And please do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. This is the kind of stuff we talk about around here all the time, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. Oh, and by the way, on a serious note, Mr. Rood is currently recovering from a stroke, so please pray for his healing and a full recovery. You know, we may disagree on theological issues, but he's loved by his family and by God, and he deserves our love too. So, in the meantime, let's take a look at his shiny new Apostles' Creed. The original Apostles' Creed is not Holy Scripture, of course. It's simply a statement of faith that grew out of the early church. It encapsulates the core beliefs of Christianity without delving too deeply into issues of doctrine. In fact, the creed is embraced by both Catholics and Protestants because it's a simple yet accurate biblical summary of our faith. In contrast to that, this new creed offers abnormally detailed statements of belief. Rood not only affirms his biblical positions, he even addresses non-biblical issues, commenting on historical figures like Eusebius and Constantine. Now, the creed affirms some things that all Christians can agree on. For example, that Jesus descended from King David and he was the prophet that Moses told us about. But there are many other statements in this creed that are problematic and even dangerous. Let's unpack 5 of them. The first statement we're going to look at is as subtle as it is dangerous. So let's trace what this creed teaches about what Rood calls the death penalty. It's mentioned in 3 of the statements. Statements 10 and 11 from the creed say,
"We believe that while Moses was on the mountain receiving the stone tablets, we bowed the knee to Egypt's golden god, breaking the blood covenant and thus incurring the death penalty. We believe that God, withholding merited judgment, established animal sacrifices as a continual reminder that the death penalty must be satisfied."
And later in statement 22 he says,
"Yeshua, the Son of God, the prophet, the Lamb of God, voluntarily paid the death penalty in our place and redeemed the world from the dominion of Satan."
So to recap, the creed seems to suggest that it was Israel's breaking of the Sinai covenant that incurred the death penalty, and then Jesus came and satisfied that death penalty with his own life. In other words, the breaking of a Torah commandment was the reason Jesus came and paid the death penalty on the cross. But that's not what Scripture teaches at all. It was Adam's sin that brought death into the world. Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, referring to Adam, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. For sin indeed was in the world before the law was given. And that's why Jesus came. For as by the one man's disobedience, referring to Adam, the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience, referring to Jesus, the many will be made righteous. This creed wants to put the Torah front and center in Jesus' work on the cross, but Scripture teaches that God's plan of redemption began long before the Torah was given. It was sin entering the world through Adam, what we call the fall, that necessitated the work of Jesus. Statement number 4 of the Creed says,
We believe Jehovah brought the descendants of Israel and a mixed multitude of Gentiles out of Egypt with a mighty display of power, so the entire world would know his name. Moses led us through the Red Sea to Mount Sinai in Midian, where Jehovah offered to make us a nation of priests and kings.
There are a few things here that jumped out at me, but the big one is his suggestion that
Jehovah offered to make us a nation of priests and kings. A nation of priests and kings.
the phrase "a nation of priests and kings" was a bit surprising. That's not the phrase used in the Bible when God spoke to Israel at Mount Sinai. Exodus 19:6 says, "You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Nothing here about kings. And Peter cited the same idea in his first epistle. "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession." So priests, yes. Kings, no. The Bible doesn't teach that followers of God are called to be kings. For a minute I thought maybe Rood had simply misspoken. Maybe he meant to say a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. But then he repeated the same thing again in statement 39.
We believe Yeshua loved us, sanctified us by his blood, and called us to conduct ourselves as priests and kings. As priests and kings. A nation of priests and kings.
He's definitely teaching the idea of priests and kings. And after a bit of digging, I discovered where I think he's getting this idea. The phrase kings and priests is only found in the King James Version of one verse in Revelation chapter 1. In the beginning of the book, where John is greeting the 7 churches, we find this phrase, "Unto him that loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood, and hath made us kings and priests unto God and his Father." In Greek, the word that the King James Version translates as kings is basileia, which can mean either kingship and sovereign authority, or it can mean kingdom. And the idea that God has given his followers some sort of sovereign kingly authority just isn't biblical. Jesus calls us to be servants and disciples and to be holy. We're called his sheep and fishers of men and children of God. He says the world will hate us and we will join him in his suffering. But nowhere are we called to be kings, which is why every other English translation of Revelation 1 verse 6 renders the Greek word basileia into the English word kingdom, not kings. Rood's teaching here is based on a single problematic translation of a single verse that doesn't align with what the Bible as a whole teaches. The second thing I noticed in statement number 4 is a little more subtle. Rood claims a mixed multitude of Gentiles came out of Egypt with Israel.
We believe Jehovah brought the descendants of Israel and a mixed multitude of Gentiles out of Egypt with a mighty display of power.
And then in subsequent statements in this creed, he refers to various historical events as applying to us or we.
Moses led us through the Red Sea to Mount Sinai in Midian, where Jehovah offered to make us a nation of priests and kings. We believe Jehovah shouted down his 10 commandments and entered into a blood covenant with us. We believe that while Moses was on the mountain receiving the stone tablets, we bowed the knee to Egypt's golden god.
There are a couple problems with this. First of all, like me, Rood is not Jewish, so it wasn't his people who were led through the Red Sea or who bowed down to the golden calf. It was the Israelites. And secondly, based on his full creed, this appears to be a veiled attempt to smuggle the Gentiles into the Sinai covenant and under the law of Moses. Yes, Exodus 12:38 does indicate that a mixed multitude, which probably included Gentiles, left Egypt along with Israel. But Gentiles weren't part of the Sinai covenant. As I explained in my video, Gentiles in the Law, which I'll link to below, Exodus 19 and following clearly teaches that the covenant made at Mount Sinai was a contract solely between God and the nation of Israel, and the law of Moses served as the terms of this contract. So Gentiles have never been part of that covenant or under the law of Moses. The creed also includes a common refrain of the Hebrew roots movement.
We believe Yeshua fulfilled the one and only sign verifying his authenticity, the sign of the prophet Jonah. 3 days and 3 nights in the grave and raised on the 3rd day.
This is followed by 4 additional detailed statements that carefully trace the timeline from Jesus' crucifixion to his resurrection. This line of teaching stems from the Hebrew roots belief that Christians shouldn't be celebrating Easter. And by the way, I examined that claim in my video, Should Christians Celebrate Easter?, which I'll link to below as well. What Rood is teaching in this creed is that Jesus was actually resurrected on the Sabbath, the last day of the week. Sunday was just when his tomb was discovered empty. Now, the biblical passage behind this teaching comes from Matthew 12:38 and following. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered him, saying, Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you. But he answered them, An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it, except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Now, there are 2 problems that arise because of the sort of wooden literalism that Rood applies to this text in Matthew 12. The first has to do with the length of time.
The sign of the prophet Jonah. 3 days and 3 nights in the grave and raised on the 3rd day.
Did you catch the math problem in this statement? If Jesus literally spent 3 entire days and nights in the grave, 1, 2, 3, and then on which day would he then rise? It would be the 4th day, because the 3rd day would have been spent in the grave. So the first problem is that Rood suggests that Jesus literally meant that he would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. But did he intend this statement to be taken literally? Well, the phrase heart of the earth is clearly not meant literally. It's a metaphor for the grave. What about 3 days and 3 nights? Well, it turns out this is an idiom as well. Let's look at just a few of the many statements Jesus made about his death and resurrection. The Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the 3rd day he will be raised up. It is necessary that the Son of Man suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, be killed, and be raised the 3rd day. Destroy this temple, and I will raise it up in 3 days. Then he began to teach them that it was necessary for the Son of Man to suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, be killed, and rise after 3 days. It turns out the only time Jesus ever uses the phrase 3 days and 3 nights was when he referenced Jonah. And in that case, he lifted the phrase directly from Jonah 1:17, which says, And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Everywhere else, Jesus uses various other phrases interchangeably. On the 3rd day, in 3 days, after 3 days, raised the 3rd day. Jesus wasn't confused. He was using different expressions that all mean the same thing. In 1 Corinthians 15 tells us that Jesus was raised on the 3rd day, according to the scriptures. Now, the second problem with Rood's teaching here is that Jesus' resurrection wasn't the only sign given to verify his authenticity.
We believe Yeshua fulfilled the one and only sign verifying his authenticity.
Just prior to his Jonah pronouncement in Matthew 12, Jesus had healed a man's shriveled hand and driven the demons out of another man, and he did so in front of the Pharisees. But they accused him of operating under the power of Satan. So, recognizing their hard hearts, Jesus refused to give them any more proof of his identity. However, he did say that there would be one further sign, his resurrection from the dead. This would be their final opportunity to believe. The Gospel of John closes with these words. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing, you may have life in his name. Jesus' resurrection on the third day wasn't the only given sign of his authenticity, but it was the final sign for the Pharisees who refused to believe. There's one last statement in this creed that I want to look at, and it's a weird one. Maybe it was a Freudian slip, I don't know, but it's worth pointing out. In statement number 8, Rood says,
We believe in Moses, who declared that God would send another prophet in the future who would speak only what he hears from the throne.
Notice he doesn't say, we believe that Moses declared. He says, we believe in Moses who declared.
We believe in Moses.
We believe in Moses.
Elsewhere in this creed, Rood says things like,
We believe Moses gave commandments to which we believe the testimony of Moses.
There's nothing wrong with saying, we believe Moses gave commandments, or we believe the testimony of Moses. I believe both those things too. But this idea of believing in Moses, as if Moses was some sort of deity worthy of our faith, if that wasn't a slip of the tongue, and Rood worded it that way intentionally, that's a bit concerning. Okay, there you go, our survey of Michael Rood's new Apostles' Creed. Are you going to adopt it? Was I too hard on him? Did I miss anything? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. Shalom.